The Enron Scandal, Houston, Texas, 2001. A chilling silence filled the Enron headquarters. The once bustling office floor, where traders shouted into phones and screens flashed millions of dollars in profit, now looked like a ghost town. Computers were unplugged, boxes lined the hallways, security guards stood near the doors as if watching over a crime scene. Workers, accountants, assistants, and executives were packing up years of their lives. Some were crying, some were too shocked to speak. Just weeks ago, Enron was one of America's most powerful companies. Now, it was gone. Bankrupt. Destroyed. Outside, the Texas winter sun hit the Enron logo that still glimmered on the skyscraper's glass. A painful reminder of a dream that had just turned into America's biggest corporate nightmare. One employee whispered as she walked out, "They told us everything was fine." Another replied softly, "They lied." Billions of dollars vanished. Retirement savings, gone. Families who had trusted Enron's promises were left with nothing but pieces of paper now worth zero. News cameras surrounded the building. Reporters shouted questions at every person coming out. Did you know the company was lying? Were the executives hiding the truth? Who is responsible for this disaster? The CEO, Jeffrey Skilling, had already resigned. The founder, Kenneth Lay, was silent. And deep inside Enron's files, investigators were beginning to uncover something dark, a massive secret that would shake America's trust in business forever. But how did a company once called America's most innovative become the symbol of greed, lies, and betrayal? To answer that, we need to rewind. It all began in the 1980s. Kenneth Lay, a charming and confident man from Missouri, had a dream. He wanted to change the way energy worked in America. He merged two gas companies and created something new, Enron, based in Houston, Texas. At first, Enron was just a normal energy company, selling and delivering natural gas. But Kenneth Lay had bigger plans. He wanted Enron to be more than a utility company. He wanted it to be an energy empire. When Jeffrey Skilling joined Enron, everything changed. Skilling wasn't your typical businessman. He was smart, bold, and obsessed with numbers. He came up with a risky idea called mark-to-market accounting. It sounded technical, but it was dangerous. Here's how it worked. Instead of recording profits when Enron actually earned money, the company could record profits the same day it signed a deal, even if the money wouldn't come for years. That meant Enron could say, "We made $100 million today," even if the project hadn't started yet. It made Enron's profits look huge, but it was mostly imagination. Investors loved it. Enron stock went up and up. Employees were told to buy Enron, live Enron, be Enron. It became a culture, flashy, confident, untouchable. Inside the office, the atmosphere was electric. Young workers were making fortunes. The company encouraged risk. The bigger the gamble, the better. But behind the fancy offices and expensive suits, cracks were forming. Every time a deal failed, Enron hid the loss using secret companies, partnerships designed to keep debts off their official books. These fake companies had strange names like LJM and Chuco, and they existed only to make Enron look richer than it was. It was a house built on lies. By 1999, Enron was everywhere. Electricity, broadband, even weather trading. Yes, Enron claimed it could trade weather predictions like stocks. The media called it the future of energy. But inside, employees were starting to notice something strange. The numbers didn't add up. Profits on paper didn't match cash in the bank. Some projects that were reported as successful were actually failing. Sharon Watkins, a vice president at Enron, began asking questions. She looked at the hidden accounts and saw something terrifying: billions in fake profits and debt disguised as assets. In August 2001, she wrote an anonymous letter to Kenneth Lay. It said, "I am incredibly nervous that we will implode in a wave of accounting scandals." Lay ignored her. Instead, he told employees to keep faith in the company. Meanwhile, Jeffrey Skilling suddenly resigned, just months before the truth came out. And then, the dominoes began to fall. By October 2001, the financial world started to smell trouble. Enron's stock price dropped fast. Reporters asked tough questions. Investors panicked. The company tried to calm everyone, but it was too late. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, began investigating Enron's books. What they found was shocking. Enron had been lying for years. They had created over 3,000 shell companies to hide billions of dollars in debt. In November, Enron stock, once worth over $90, crashed to less than $1. Thousands of employees lost their jobs. Pensions disappeared. People who trusted Enron's 401k plans were left broke. The streets of Houston were filled with disbelief. Some called it the day corporate America died. And as investigators moved deeper into the case, one question grew louder across the country. Who would pay for the biggest corporate fraud in U.S. history? The truth was darker than anyone imagined. The Enron building in downtown Houston still stood tall, glass shining under the Texas sun, but inside, the truth was starting to rot through the walls. Federal investigators were closing in. News crews camped outside. Angry employees shouted at the cameras, waving their retirement statements, some crying, some furious. One woman screamed, "They told us to keep buying Enron stock, even when they were selling theirs." That was the first clue. While employees were losing everything, Enron's top executives, Jeffrey Skilling, Kenneth Lay, and Chief Financial Officer Andrew Fastow, had quietly sold their own shares before the collapse. They had made millions while telling everyone else to stay calm.
Andrew Fastow, the company's financial wizard, became the key figure in the investigation. He looked like the man who could make money appear out of thin air. To most people, he was a genius. But to investigators, he was hiding something massive. Fastow had created secret partnerships that only he controlled. These partnerships, with strange names like LJM1 and LJM2, were supposed to help Enron reduce risk. But in reality, they were being used to hide debt and fake profits. Imagine this. Enron would sell something fake to one of Fastow's secret companies. Then it would record that as profit, even though no real money existed. On paper, Enron looked like it was winning. In truth, it was drowning. The deeper investigators dug, the more lies they found. Emails, spreadsheets, voice recordings. They all told the same story. A company that had been built on illusions. In October 2001, the Wall Street Journal broke the story wide open. Enron's hidden debt raises questions about its finances. Overnight, the company's image collapsed. Reporters chased executives through airports. News anchors called it America's corporate earthquake. Jeffrey Skilling denied everything. He said, "There was no fraud at Enron." Kenneth Lay looked calm in front of the cameras, telling reporters, "Enron is fundamentally strong." But behind the scenes, Lay was terrified. He knew the truth. Enron was days away from total ruin. Inside the company, workers were told to stay loyal. The internal message boards were filled with confusion and fear. Someone wrote anonymously, "How can our leaders still say everything is fine when our stock is worth pennies?" The company's accounting firm, Arthur Andersen, was also in trouble. They had been Enron's auditors, the ones supposed to check the numbers and protect the public. But when investigators arrived, Andersen employees were caught shredding thousands of Enron documents. They destroyed evidence, thinking they could erase the truth. But it was too late. By November 2001, Enron's stock price hit rock bottom, less than 50 cents. Banks refused to lend the money. Customers fled. And on December 2, 2001, Enron officially filed for bankruptcy, the largest in U.S. history at that time. More than 20,000 employees lost their jobs. Pensions were gone. Retirement savings vanished overnight. Many employees found out not from management, but from watching the news. Some stood outside the Houston skyscraper, holding cardboard boxes filled with their personal belongings. Others sat in cars crying. They had trusted the company with everything, and the company had betrayed them. But the story didn't end there, because now the FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice were on the case. Inside the investigation room in Washington, D.C., stacks of papers covered the tables. Agents connected names, companies, and transactions with red strings on a giant board. The web of lies stretched across states, banks, and even offshore accounts. Every trail led back to Andrew Fastow. When the pressure grew, Fastow finally cracked. In early 2002, he agreed to cooperate with investigators in exchange for a lighter sentence. What he revealed shocked everyone. He told them everything: the fake deals, the accounting tricks, the secret partnerships, and the names of those who approved it all. The government now had what they needed to bring down Enron's top men. But Kenneth Lay and Jeffrey Skilling refused to admit guilt. They claimed they didn't know what Fastow was doing, that he acted alone. The courtroom was set for one of the biggest corporate trials in U.S. history. Outside the courthouse, protesters held signs. "Justice for Enron workers. They stole our futures." Inside, reporters filled every seat. The world was watching.
As the trial began, shocking evidence played out for the public. Emails where executives joked about fooling Wall Street. Phone calls where traders celebrated energy blackouts because they made profits. And testimony showing how Enron manipulated markets, including power supplies in California, to drive up prices. It was clear Enron's corruption reached far beyond accounting. It had affected millions of Americans. The prosecutors said it best. Enron didn't just cheat numbers, they cheated people. The crowd gasped when audio recordings revealed Enron traders laughing as they shut down power lines. "Burn, baby, burn! That's money for us!" The truth was darker than anyone expected. Enron wasn't just a business scandal, it was a betrayal of trust on a national scale. And as the trial went on, the question everyone wanted answered still hung in the air. Would the powerful men at the top finally face justice? The courtroom in Houston was packed. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered. Everyone wanted to see the men who had brought down one of America's biggest corporations, Jeffrey Skilling and Kenneth Lay. They sat side by side, calm on the outside, but clearly nervous. Skilling kept his hands clasped, staring straight ahead. Lay leaned back, trying to look confident, but his eyes gave him away. The whole world was watching them, the former heroes of Wall Street, now accused of one of the biggest frauds in U.S. history. The trial began with one question: who knew what and when? The prosecutors started strong. They showed emails, phone records, and witness statements. They showed how Enron executives had faked profits, lied to investors, and destroyed evidence. But the most powerful moments came from the people Enron had hurt. Former employees took the stand. Some cried as they told their stories, how they'd lost homes, retirement savings, and health insurance. One man said, "I gave 20 years of my life to that company. They told us we were a family. Then they left us with nothing." Another woman held back tears as she said, "We believed them, we trusted them, and they betrayed us." Their voices shook the courtroom. Even the jurors looked emotional. Then came Andrew Fastow, the man at the center of the web, the former chief financial officer who once bragged about making Enron invincible. Now he stood before the court in handcuffs. He spoke quietly, his voice filled with shame. "I created partnerships to hide debt. I helped manipulate Enron's earnings, and yes, the top executives knew." The courtroom gasped. He told the jury that Skilling and Lay approved everything. They wanted Enron to look rich no matter what it cost. That moment changed everything. Skilling fought back. On the stand, he insisted he was innocent. "There was no conspiracy," he said firmly. "Enron was a great company that failed because of a loss of confidence, not fraud." He spoke like a man still trying to protect his reputation, not one admitting guilt. But every time he denied wrongdoing, prosecutors showed another email, another document, another lie. Kenneth Lay followed, the man who had built Enron from the ground up, who once promised employees they'd be the richest in America. He told the jury, "I am heartbroken. I never wanted any of this to happen." But when prosecutors showed how Lay had sold millions of dollars in Enron stock while telling employees to hold theirs, the courtroom fell silent. The evidence was clear. While others were losing everything, Lay and Skilling were saving themselves.
After months of testimony, arguments, and tears, the trial came to an end. The jury went into deliberation, and after 6 long days, they returned with the verdict. The judge asked, "Have you reached a decision?" The jury foreman stood. "Yes, Your Honor." The courtroom was silent. Jeffrey Skilling, guilty on 19 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and insider trading. Kenneth Lay, guilty on 6 counts of fraud and conspiracy. Lay's life burst into tears. Skilling closed his eyes, expressionless. Outside, former employees hugged each other and cried, not out of happiness, but out of relief. Justice had finally come. But the story didn't end there. Just weeks before his sentencing, Kenneth Lay died of a heart attack while vacationing in Colorado. Many saw it as a tragic ending. Others called it an escape from accountability. Jeffrey Skilling was sentenced to 24 years in prison, one of the harshest corporate sentences in U.S. history. Andrew Fastow got 6 years for his cooperation. Arthur Andersen, the accounting firm that helped hide Enron's lies, was found guilty of obstruction of justice and later dissolved, ending one of the world's oldest accounting companies. Thousands of lives were destroyed, not just by bankruptcy, but by broken trust. In the years that followed, Enron became more than a scandal. It became a symbol, a warning. The U.S. government passed new laws, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, to prevent another Enron. Companies were now required to be more transparent. Executives could no longer hide behind fake numbers. But for many former employees, it was too late. Their futures were gone, their dreams shattered. One man said years later, "I don't trust corporations anymore."
When Enron fell, it wasn't just a company. It was faith in the system that fell with it. Enron's name disappeared from buildings, but its story became a lesson taught in every business school in America. Greed has a price. By 2019, Jeffrey Skilling was released from prison. He tried to start a new energy business, but the world hadn't forgotten. To this day, the Enron scandal remains one of the most shocking corporate crimes in U.S. history, a story of power, pride, and betrayal. And for those who lived through it, the name Enron still echoes like a ghost, a reminder of how quickly success can turn into disaster. When greed takes over, it is no accident. It has been more than 2 decades since the collapse of Enron, yet even today, the name still carries a shadow that stretches across corporate America. In Houston, the old Enron building no longer bears its infamous logo. New tenants moved in, new names went up on the glass, but for many, every time they walk past 1400 Smith Street, they still feel the ghost of what once stood there, the dream that turned into a warning. In 2001, Enron's fall shook the world, but in the years that followed, its impact changed how the world saw power, money, and trust forever. Former employees tried to rebuild their lives. Some found new jobs, others never recovered financially. Many lost faith in corporations altogether. One woman who had worked in Enron's accounting department said in an interview years later,
"It wasn't just losing money. It was losing who we thought we were. We believed we were building something good, and it turned out to be a lie." For the city of Houston, Enron's fall was more than an economic blow. It was emotional. Thousands of families were connected to the company through jobs, schools, and local charities Enron had supported. When it vanished, so did much of that community trust. Meanwhile, the U.S. government took action. In 2002, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act was passed, a direct response to Enron's fraud. It forced companies to disclose more information, banned the destruction of audit documents, and made CEOs personally sign off on financial statements. It was America's way of saying, never again. Other corporations took note. Suddenly, the word transparency became more than a buzzword. It became survival. But despite the new laws, some wondered, could another Enron ever happen again? Experts say yes, because while laws can punish corruption, they can't erase human greed. Years later, Jeffrey Skilling, the brilliant yet arrogant CEO who once promised Enron would change the world, walked out of prison in 2019. Reporters waited outside. Cameras flashed. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just walked, quickly, past the questions, past the noise, past the world that now remembered him only as the face of corporate crime. In private interviews later, Skilling admitted he made mistakes, but still refused to take full blame. He said, "I never thought Enron was a fraud. We pushed boundaries. We failed. But I didn't mean it to end this way." To some, it sounded like denial. To others, like regret. Kenneth Lay's death in 2006 ended any chance of hearing his final truth. Whether he felt guilt or peace, no one knows. His passing left a void, not just in the trial, but in accountability. Enron's fall became a symbol, a story every future CEO, investor, and employee would be told. It became a documentary, a movie, a case study. Business schools began teaching it as a lesson in what happens when ambition outruns ethics. The phrase Enron-style accounting became shorthand for lies hidden behind big profits. And every time a new corporate scandal hit the headlines, from Wall Street to Silicon Valley, one name always returned: Enron. Because it wasn't just a company that failed. It was a moment that exposed how fragile trust can be when built on greed. Today, if you drive through downtown Houston, the skyline looks brighter. New companies rise, new dreams form. But for those who remember, Enron is still part of the city's story, a scar that never truly healed. A former Enron engineer once said, "We thought we were changing the future. Turns out, We were just teaching it a painful lesson. And maybe that's Enron's true legacy. Not just a warning about corruption, but a reminder that truth always catches up, no matter how high the cower stands. This was the Enron Scandal, Houston, Texas, 2001, a true story that showed America what happens when greed, power, and deception collide. It wasn't just a company that failed. It was a moment that changed the way America does business forever. Because in the end, no matter how big you are, the truth always wins. Stay tuned for our next real U.S. crime story, another shocking case that shaped history and reminded America that behind every fortune, there's always a story.